Today I decided to record a video on Schopenhauer's theory. If anybody ends up getting to this video due to informative purposes, um, I might not be the best person to be talking about it. I'm just going to, dump my information. For the past few days, I've been feeling very interested all of a sudden. I've known him for a while, but I've been just overly interested in him. So um, I made a few notes, and I'm going to be talking about him. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it. I just wanna have a place where I can dump my information and talk about a little bit of my thoughts. Okay, that's it. So Schopenhauer is a German philosopher, and he lived from the February 22nd, 1788 to one day before he passed away one day before my birthday on September 21st, 1860. So yeah, he was a philosopher in the 19th century. Okay, he's considered to be a pessimistic philosopher in the role in the not role but in the group of pessimistic philosophers in the pessimistic movement, if we could put it like that, after Kant. And he influenced uh, other philosophers, and he had a great role in psychology, especially in the 20th century, so with Freud and Jung. So yeah, it's very nice. Okay, so I might be looking down a little bit because I wanna I wanna check things, but okay. So Schopenhauer was thinking when he was researching his theory, he was thinking of the freedom from the pursuit of happiness, because he thought we as human beings were trapped trapped into looking for happiness and never finding it. And this chasing for happiness, he said, that only brings us suffering, because there is a clash between wanting so much to be happy and never having it. This is what his theory is going to be mainly about. So he portrays life as a prison of pain and suffering. Okay, now we're going to jump a little bit back into Kant's theory, who was another philosopher. Okay, the point in Kant that we're going to bring here is the concept of thing in itself. Okay, the thing in itself is basically, like, what he says about it is, we cannot access things in themselves. We cannot. We can only access things through our senses, so through interpretations, but we cannot access things for what they are. Okay, so our life experience would always be mediated by our senses. Even science, if you think of it, through science we find ways of representing phenomena. We never know phenomena, we never know things independently from our senses. Even if you think of sound, for example, when I was writing this, I was thinking of sound, for example, because it's obvious that we experience sound through our senses. We listen to sound through our ears, through the vibrations of the molecules. Okay, but I was thinking we can measure sound through decibels. For example, we have units that measure sound, so it's not interpreted by our senses then, right? But it is, because what science tries to find is ways of representing things for us. So when we, for example, in this sound example, when we measure sound in decibels, we are just expressing a phenomenon through a way in which we can comprehend it. Okay, so we're putting it in numbers, or we're putting it in a ruler, we're measuring it. Okay, and even if we think of it biologically, because when our eyes see things, we don't see things in the way that we I'll try to not to be confusing, but we don't see things the way we think we see things, because our brain processes the images that we see. So even Schopenhauer was not referring to this process biologically, but even if you think of it biologically, it makes sense. Of course, you don't have to agree to anything he said, but I'm just saying what he said, okay? And I think this part of history, of Kant's theory, relates to Lacan, who was a later philosopher, and yeah, he had a great contribution to psychology. I don't know if he was a psychologist, if he acted as a therapist, but he had a great contribution to it. And he we talk a lot about fantasies and daydreaming. So not daydreaming, sorry, about fantasies. He said that fantasy isn't just about daydreaming, it's much more. So it's the whole structuring frame that allows us to relate to the world and to be in this world. Okay, and he says his ultimate phrase, that is, there is no sexual relation. There, what he meant by that is there is no sexual relation between, like, for example, me and another person. There is a sexual relation between me and my projections that I pull onto this other person. So it's I don't relate to the person, I relate to my fantasies and the role I put to them in my head. Okay, this is what Lacan said. And very it divides opinions, but this is what he said. And there is also the Shakespearean quote, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So this all relates to what we're going to be talking about. This isn't Schopenhauer yet, okay? Now back to Schopenhauer. I hope this is not being too confusing. So he says that Schopenhauer says the world is one only thing. Okay, the world is the world is the one thing. Okay, so to the universe, you're not yourself. You're not that you're not yourself, but to the universe, you are matter. You are chemical elements. You are atoms. And I think talking about atoms, I think it is very nice to think about it, because if you think about it, I said that he was born by the end of the 18th century. Did I say 18 at the beginning of the video? I said 19, but he was born at the end of the 18th century. Okay, if you remember in chemistry, Dalton was one of the first um, one of the first people who designed a model to the atom. Remember that he said it was an invisible particle, blah blah blah, the smallest particle ever, blah blah blah. So if we think about it, they lived at the same time. So although he doesn't, although Schopenhauer doesn't mention Dalton, I think there is an important connection even through the shared time frame. Okay, so going back to the universe, everything is one, and that is matter, atoms. Okay, the only thing that differs us one from another would be time and space. So time would be like a ship, and space would be like waves. And the shock between the ship and the waves would be what would create a sort of a bubble that is the individuation of, what did I write here, of the sorry, of the object. Individuation of the object. Okay, so for example, the difference from me to this plant here would be this, because at the end of the day we are made of the same things, that is like dust, if you think of it in a Christian point of view, which he did not. But okay, now you belong to everything according to Schopenhauer, and everything belongs to you. And at the end of the day, there is no everything and there is no you, because it's the same. So there's no separation. The separation that we see is a false abstraction of our senses. Okay, if you think of it in a psychological sense, so if you think of it in a therapy setting, in a therapy session, the patient doesn't ever tell you the truth. He never tells the truth to their therapist, because there is no truth. There is not such a thing. What is brought to the session is the patient's perceptions of the world. Okay, and this is interesting, I think. So basically, what we got so far is the world to Schopenhauer is the way we experience the world is a representation. So we don't have the access to things in themselves. The world is the one thing that ultimately is the will. And this is going to be important. We're going to get into the will. Okay. Schopenhauer said that there is something that connects all of us, which is the will of life. Of course, he focuses on human experiences, but also animals are included in this. Plants are included in this. Uh, and ultimately, everything is included in this, because if I get, for example, this thing, if I drop it, it's going to fall. So there is a will of life, a will of movement in everything. There is a desire to expand, a conducting wire, the will to power, which was later brought by Nietzsche. It's inspired in this. The will to power in Nietzsche's theory, was it has a relation to this, and also the actualizing tendency in the Carl Rogers theory, which is still very studied nowadays. Fun fact: even in like the phenomenon of suicide and suicide prevention, Carl Rogers has been very important to this, and it has roots in what we're seeing now. So I think this is nice. So this wheel that Schopenhauer says would be a touching point between our representative world that we see and the beyond the world, what we could nowadays call a spiritual realm. The wheel would be what connects these both things. So we experience a will to do every and anything. Anything depends on this will. We have this will to eat, to sleep, to have sex, to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. if you think of it, you can also see this as an opposition in a way to the Newton's theory of uh, inertia, the first law of Newton. He doesn't oppose, okay, to Newton, but yeah, if you wanna make a, I don't know, I just my mind goes far away sometimes, and yeah, he came after Newton, but I I think we can use it as a metaphor. So the inertia, the first law of Newton says that things tend to remain the way they are. Schopenhauer is going to, of course, in a physical way, but Schopenhauer says that things have a will to expand. So yeah, it's opposite. Okay, just they don't oppose to one another. Okay, Schopenhauer doesn't oppose to Newton. Newton wasn't born. Schopenhauer wasn't born by Newton's time. But anyways, I'm getting lost here. Um, and you can say, okay, but the body has chemical regulations, for example. So when I'm hungry, it's my body acting. When I'm sleepy, for example, my cortisol levels are decreasing, my melatonin levels are increasing. So there is an explanation, in fact. Okay, but ultimately, if you think of it, where do the cells get their will from? And you can go inside the cells, you can go to the substances. Where do things come from? Uh, and and then there is Schopenhauer's, I think, most famous quote, that is, life is a constant oscillation between the will to have and the boredom to possess. This will that we don't really know where it comes from is insatiable. So, for example, we are in high school, then we want to get into college. Then we get into college and we want to graduate. We want to graduate, we want to get a job. We get the job, we want to raise, and it's never ending. Therefore, this will being unsatiable, and considering that we feel happy when we get rid of that will, then happiness ultimately is unattainable. And if you think of it, the fact that this will is one thing for the whole world, then this will is contradictory. This will attack itself, because for me to have my will suppressed, for me to have what I want, another person or another situation objectively has to have their will not attended. They have to suffer and they have to get a no. So, for example, if I'm dating someone, this person is going to deny other people, assuming, or if I want to get a job, uh, other people will have it denied. If I want to eat something, whether it's a plant, a fungus, an animal, whatever it is, the will of another being has to have stopped so mine could exist and continue existing. If I eat lettuce, that plant had to stop growing, had to stop its life so I could eat it. Okay? The solution for this matter would be to freeze the will And now we're going to get into that. How do we freeze the wheel? How do we ease the pain? Schopenhauer separated three more practical forms of suppressing our desires. Okay, and then he talks about two ways of doing it in a more existential way, like in sort of a shift of mindset. So it's not so practical, it's more of absorbing the way and like comprehending and starting to act under that ethic. Okay, so the first practical way of freezing the will would be through art, because for Schopenhauer, the art is the contemplation of beauty in itself. When you contemplate a piece of art, time and space are freezed for him, and therefore the will is freezed, and the person becomes a mirror of the object. Uh, he dedicates himself more into describing art through the lens of contemplation rather than creation, active creation. Although I personally think that that could be contemplated here. He talks a little bit about the the figure of a genius in another part of his theory, which I'm not going to get into, but when he talks about this freezing the wheel matter, it's more faced to contemplating art rather than making it. But I think this could also be applied here. But this is my opinion, okay? The second way of freezing the wheel he describes is through nature, because Schopenhauer describes that we escape from the individualistic will and connect better with the universal will when we are connected to the nature. So we connect ourselves to the oneness of life, and we can perceive our smallness there. And ultimately, we get that weight of individualism being pulled out of us. So it's the will operating as a whole in the whole, okay, in nature. And now, music is another way of freezing the will. Music to Schopenhauer would be the highest form of art, because he says music is a direct copy of the will itself. While art, for example, would be the representation of the the ideas. If you think of Plato describes the ideas as being perfect forms. The art would be representing these perfect forms, but the music would be representing the will itself. Because listening to music and like really paying attention to the experience would mean to experience feelings in the will without having a reason or an object in mind for you to do so. You're just experiencing it. You're just there. So for example, I can feel anger, I can feel lust, I can feel happiness, I can feel sadness without having necessarily an object for them. I don't have a reason to be feeling that. I feel these things in themselves. I don't feel that over someone. Okay. And he says that this is an immediate comprehension What did I? Sorry. He says this is an immediate comprehension of the word's essence without the intellectual's comprehension. Okay. It's an immediate comprehension of the will. He said that listening to music in a mindful way is when we get in touch with the will, with this higher realm. If we think of it in modern terms, he didn't say it, but and now we're going to get into his what he said about how to freeze this will, how to decrease suffering ultimately in a more integrated way, if we can put it like that. Okay, so his first way is through compassion. He said that every human being is stuck in a never-ending cycle of desire and neediness. Desire and neediness. It's that life is a constant oscillation between between the will to have and the burden to possess. Everybody is stuck in this prison, if you think of it. So suffering is going to be intrinsically human, and he describes compassion as a transcendency. So compassion would be breaking your ego, breaking your notion of self. Okay, ego that I'm using here is your notion of self, breaking your individualism, and being able to connect with others by recognizing the unity that there is among the both of you and among all of us, after all. So I no longer degrade the other because deep down I am this other. And I think this speaks a lot about judgment as well. And Schopenhauer talks about the importance of not only acknowledging this but feeling and practicing it. Okay. I was not going to bring something here, but I decided to. As an example, I was looking for a song for a while. It's a Portuguese song that said something like, maybe it's not so different after all. It said something like that, but I cannot remember who sings the song. And I was crazy trying to find that song because I wanted to see this message, because I felt like it had something. I don't know, it came to my mind. It's a song I've seen months ago and I can't find it. And then I ran to ChatGPT this week and I described the song for it, described its lyrics, and it said, we tried to find it, we couldn't, and it said, ultimately, okay, I cannot find the song, but I can recommend you a similar thing that is a Rumi's history. It's a Rumi's story. And I decided to bring this here because it was very random, because I was looking for a specific song and the ChatGPT told me that, okay, I don't have the song, but I have something that's not even a poem. but I have this story. Same vibe, girl. Enjoy it. And I decided to bring it because Rumi is a Persian poet from the 13th century, I think, and it has a personal meaning to me. So I decided to bring it. Thank you. So apparently, he has this story of imagine yourself, you're in a dark room, you cannot see anything, and then you start like touching the air and you feel something, and then yeah, you have your notions from of what you're feeling from your senses. Okay, what happens is you're not alone in that room. There are a couple more other people with you in the room, and they're also touching what you are touching. But each one of you has a totally different saying of what you are touching. You guys have totally different experiences. The lights are turned on, and it happens that what you guys are touching is an elephant. So I forgot the name of that, but one of you is touching that, the other one is touching his ears, the other one is touching his butt, whatever it is. So each one of you has a different experience, but deep down, it's the same core thing that you are touching. This is pretty much the sense of unity we're talking about here, if it makes sense. Okay. And when we experience this compassion, we develop well-being not only for the other but to ourselves, to breaking the sense of individualism that we see so much. And last but not least, Schopenhauer talks about resign. And this part of his theory is very close to the Eastern philosophy, so Buddhism, for example. He ultimately talks about denying the will as a possibility. So denying the will would be a voluntary discipline that freezes the desire, and by freezing the desire, you're going to freeze your suffering. Of course, you cannot do it completely, but you can at least decrease your will. But he says deny the will. Okay, this is me talking, but he said denying the will, because the only way to win this game would be simply not competing. So you remove yourself and you remove your desires from the game. And he says that happiness shouldn't be an aspiration, because what happiness is, it's the relief of a pain, if you think of it. So for example, if I feel content, what I feel, if you think of it, is the relief of a suffering. So I was suffering, I'm no longer. If you think of an orgasm, for example, it's the relief of a tension, the relief of a frustration I have for wanting someone and not being able to get someone, or to have my lust suppressed. So it's always the suppression of a bad feeling. Okay. But he says that suffering is, at the end of the day, what allows us to grow. And attending to our wills, it brings us expansion because it allows us to keep moving and going after what we want. But it is, at the end of the day, a trap. If I think of it as ways for me to be happy. So people say, no, but when I marry, or when I get this job, when I do this, when I do that, then I'm going to be happy, then my life is going to be more peaceful, then XYZ. But the answer for Schopenhauer is actually within. Yeah, and it is very interesting. I had a lot of fun studying a little bit of him. Um, and yeah, I think this is it. I'm going to leave this video here. Yeah, this was very nice dumping information and being a nerd for for, for 36 minutes in the middle of the night. But yeah, I don't think anybody watched this video. But if anybody did, thank you very much. Yeah, I had fun. And yeah, bye.